to support this evening. An evening with a difference. I think we're going to hear a unique story where the Falls Road area, which I think will be labelled Catholic in everybody's perception, wants Presbyterians to be part of their life and community. And Jake McShakish and David Moore are going to tell us about that. They will talk for a while. There'll be time for questions. Then there'll be supper. And there'll be time then for you to talk to them one-to-one if you want to do that and learn more. So thank you for coming, David and Jake, and it's over to you.
Falcha, hard you? There you are. I'm having a wee go at the Irish, and that's largely because of where we are. We're based in the Gaeltacht quarter in West Belfast, and my friend Jake will say probably a bit more about that. Personally, this is a huge privilege for us to be here, for me especially, back in County Monaghan. It was 30 years ago. How could you believe, 30 years ago, that I became the minister of Drum, Cootehill and Kilmount Presbyterian churches. I'll not say the best churches in County Monaghan, but, you know, very good churches anyway. And we spent 8 very, very happy years there. Our family expanded while we were there. Sam was born, so he was born in Cavan General, so he's our wee Republican, and he's very proud of that fact. My wife Elaine is sorry she can't be here, but she is available to do PWs, and you can give her a shout anytime you want her. We have the 3 children, Josh, Hannah and Samuel. Josh is married to Megan. She's from America, and they live just outside Dungannon. Hannah is married to Jamie, and they live in Glasgow, and they have our 2 granddaughters. How could I have grandchildren, you think to yourself? So Elle is 4 in a few weeks, and Lois is 18 months. And we don't get to see them as often as we'd like, but we look forward to seeing them when we can. And then Sam from Cavan, he studied in Scotland and stayed in Scotland. No sign of anybody getting serious there, but we are hoping that maybe one of these days it might happen. I think he hopes that too, but he's not making any steps in that direction. I want to say a very warm word of thanks to David and Elsie for the invitation and for the hospitality. I was saying to Jake, when Elaine and I came here all those years ago, David and Elsie were like mummy and daddy to all the ministers and their wives in the presbytery, and they're still like that. So it was great to share, and the years have been kind to both of you, I have to say that. Well, we left here. Sorry about that. Maybe it was a wrong decision. I don't know. We left here anyway, and we went to Kilkenny and then to Knock in East Belfast. And now I find myself as a Presbyterian minister in West Belfast. At present, there are no Presbyterian churches and no Presbyterians who live there. But you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? You may as well start at a good point. Okay. You've got to start somewhere. But how did we end up there? Well, this book, there's a chapter in this book that explains that. And these are amongst the last copies available. So to say that these are like gold dust would be an understatement. But because David is such a good friend, we've brought them. Normally these are carried about by a security van and no one else is allowed to touch them. And for a donation of any size, but not less than €5, a donation of any size into the big jar over there for Cahans, you can have one of these for yourself. And if you run out, do share them with your friends. My chapter in it, if you don't get a book and you want to read that chapter, if you email me, I will let you have that chapter. And my email address is on this wee card. The wee cards are down beside the books if you want those. The book was the brainchild of someone I want to introduce to you now, my friend Jake McShakish. He's the director of Forbit Faoiste, which is an Irish language promotion agency that works in West Belfast. And while I was thinking about introducing Presbyterians back to the Falls Road, I think, Jake, you were thinking something similar as well. And so it's quite a remarkable story. We lived on different sides of the city. We didn't know each other at the time, and most people wouldn't have put us together, perhaps. But I firmly believe God brought us together and gave us this project. We've become good friends, and so it's my pleasure to invite Jake to come and to speak to us, after which I'll say a little bit, and then we can have our questions. But let's give him a County Monaghan welcome.
Well, Chinnig Yart mar Caijan and Chin, okay. Well, look, got a million all of us in Corey Hoffman Shaw Locht. Hannig Man Shaw, done ugly Shaw, and Kiadur and Lee Jagocht was a Kuig, was Bral and Hochten Shaw, the Harvard Roche Ear Gulta, was at Valley War. Cahan's, I'm delighted to be here and see it like this. I first came to Cahan's in 1985 when I was engaged in pre-legal work, and we would use this as a meeting place. So it was a different kind of meeting house, but at that stage it was derelict. There wasn't a window in the place, they were all put in with bricks, so it's beautiful to see it here. And I want to come back here regularly between 85 and about 94, and then I didn't come back to Monaghan for a long time. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's great to see so many people turning out, and I just want to commend all of the people here and here who were involved in the original committee that have brought this back. In terms of me, I'm a father of 5, grandfather of 6. I was born and reared in Belfast. My mother was a Catholic and my father an ardent Marxist. So I was brought up with really no religion, and I don't have any faith even today, although I admire people who have it, and I'm a bit jealous of them. I think that in growing up, we grew up I was born in 1958, so I grew up really throughout the Troubles. I was directly involved in the Republican movement and was a very senior member of the Republican movement right up until 1997. I've been a lifelong Irish language activist. Brought all my family up Irish language speakers, and have been involved in most of the Irish language developments in the west of the city. We started out in West Belfast in 1969 with 9 children being educated through the medium of Irish. We now have 12 primary schools and a secondary school which alone has over 1,000 pupils, and we're just about to open a second secondary school. When we began to engage with the authorities in the north in terms of developing the Irish language, it was very slow going. We had Minister Nelson McCausland, then we had Minister Given, and all from the DUP, and all who were less than enthusiastic about developing things. But we made a breakthrough in 2014 when we had ministers who were more inclined to see the developmental potential of the Irish language. And since 2014, we have brought in £58 million in infrastructural development into the west of the city. That includes building offices, schools, businesses, and cultural centres. What brought me into contact with Presbyterianism was 2 things. First of all, I'm a very close friend of Tom Hartley's, and Tom Hartley has been a champion of Presbyterianism in the west of the city since the 70s. He's the leading historian in the city on the history of Presbyterianism. He himself is a Catholic, although his mother's father was Presbyterian, so he obviously got a bit of the Presbyterian blood. When we began to explore the place where we found ourselves operating, it was a Presbyterian church right up until 1982, and there were still Presbyterians worshipping on the Falls Road in 1982 at the height of the hunger strikes, which many people find surprising. There were also, at one stage, 7 Presbyterian churches along the length of the Falls, but that community, through our troubled history, moved away. And West Belfast, throughout my growing up, was a monocultural area. There was only one view of the world. The world was Catholic, it was nationalist, it was Republican, it was Irish language, it was GAA, and that's all we knew. But as we all know, it's much more layered and much more complex than that. And in the year of 2018, we were gearing up for the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Culterland, which is an Irish language centre. And I said, well, 130 years ago this was built as a Presbyterian meeting house, so we're actually just here for a very short time. So why don't we look to do a project called Celebrating Custodianship? And so we began to reach out to different congregations of Presbyterians and to invite them in to do a year-long project with us, which looked at West Belfast's lost Presbyterian heritage. And at one of those meetings where we were trying to get this organised, Tom Hartley had come off with a phrase about bringing it back home. So bringing Presbyterianism back to where it belonged on the Falls Road, deconstructing what had become a very narrow interpretation of the area and broadening that out. And we found the Presbyterian community more than willing to engage with us. The kind of breakthrough was the arrival of this man, David. When I first met David, he said, what are your objectives in doing the project? And I said, they're very simple. They're twofold: to reacquaint Presbyterians with the Irish language, which they did so much to save in this city, and secondly, to reacquaint people on the Falls Road with their Presbyterian heritage and the heritage that we shared for so many years. So Celebrating Custodianship became a series of lectures, debates, talks, and at the outset I said, we need to produce a book, and that book needs to look at that journey of celebrating custodianship. So all in all, across the year, we had congregations from all over the city coming and joining us, and we formed some really brilliant friendships. David went one step further and decided to become the minister to West Belfast. So it's almost like the cabinet minister you have without portfolio. So he very much was making his own script. And we do now have Presbyterians back worshipping on the Falls Road. So in the Irish Language Cultural Centre, once a month, there's a Presbyterian service, which is normally bilingual. There's also a Presbyterian Bible study group, which meets in my offices upstairs, and that meets weekly, and again, it's bilingual. David and Elaine and other members of the Presbyterian congregation are learning Irish. And I think it's only when we begin to scrape away the surface that we realise how intertwined all of our histories are, and how complex it is, and how rich it is. I mean, this building here, 1751, not the building, but the congregation. So that's a long, long time in anybody's book. And so it means that Presbyterians have been contributing to and developing this area for hundreds of years. And the notion that all of us on this island are anything but mongrels astounds me. We have a history on these islands of going back and forward, up and down, back and forth, marrying, intermarrying, falling in, falling out. So we're all, to one degree or another, mongrels from the same mothers and fathers. And we have on this island a really unique treasure in the Presbyterian Church, in that it was Presbyterians who, at the very point where the Irish language was going into steep decline, stepped in and revived it. The centre that we're in is called Culturlan MacAdam O'Fake, and MacAdam was Robert MacAdam. Robert MacAdam was a Presbyterian industrialist who set up the Soho Foundry in Belfast. He spoke 13 languages fluently, and he was conversant with 25 languages. He created a Bible in the a dictionary in the 1850s called MacAdam's Comparative Lexicography, and he listed the head words in Irish and then translated them into 25 European and Indo-European languages. He was a bachelor, so he had plenty of time on his hands. He also was a huge benefactor to the city, and he collected Irish manuscripts from all over the island. He produced the first water-driven turbine, and through that he made his business international. So he befriended Pasha Ibrahim Ahmed Aldun Raham from Alexandria, and the two of them would converse together in Arabic and French, and they would exchange letters. And MacAdam sold him the patents for the water turbines, which were then installed all across North Africa. And when MacAdam's business went out, Mackey's took on the maintenance contracts for them, and Mackey's would go across to Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Libya and Egypt, servicing the machines. He invited Pasha Ibrahim to Belfast in the 1870s, and Pasha Ibrahim landed in Belfast docks with a flock, or with a crowd of elephants, and he came up the Falls Road on elephant back, and he commissioned a set of stained glass windows, cast iron stained glass windows, to be inserted into the university in Alexandria. It was then captured by the British when the British invaded Egypt, and the windows were taken out and they were moved to the Museum of Islamic History in Islamabad. So if you want to visit MacAdam, the Presbyterian's windows, you have to talk to the Taliban. That's how the world changes, but also how we're all connected. And I think that the journey that we have had reacquainting ourselves with Presbyterianism has been hugely enriching. And I also hope that the experience of the Presbyterians who are reintegrating into West Belfast is equally rewarding. But I see it just as a small step on a journey, because in the Gaeltacht Quarter, our mission is to decouple the Irish language from any political context, and to allow all of the people in this island to begin talking about cultural identity and language in ways which aren't linked to political identity. Your political identity is totally distinct from your cultural identity. And your cultural identity, if you live anywhere on this island, has a good smattering of a very big number of influences. So we've had the Danes here, we've had the Normans here. That crowd in Dublin, their Irish is badly contaminated by Norman French. And when we go to universities in the south, they call us fata blind, because in Ulster Irish, we only emphasise the first syllable. They emphasise the penultimate syllable, and where that changes, they put a fata on, which is really a French grave. So where we would say cobostja, they say gobostja. Where we say colostja, they say colostja. And they say that we speak an Irish which is degraded, and we keep reminding them that Ulster, and when we talk about Ulster in that context, it's from County Louth right across to Sligo. Everything north of that was totally Gaelic speaking right up until the 17th century. In Belfast alone, as late as 1860, 65% of the people in East Belfast were Irish speaking. when we did one of our projects looking at the Shankill Road, there are 3 streets in the Shankill called Meanan Street, Blaney Street and Brennan Street, and they're named after 3 Irish-speaking Catholic priests. And the reason for that is that the people living in those streets had insufficient English to converse, and they had to bring Gaelic-speaking priests in. And those priests are honoured in the name of those 3 streets. And when we were over, this was still right at the edge of the Troubles, and we were over taking photographs one day in Meanan Street, and I could see all these loyalist guys, and they were juking down because we had the cameras out, and I said to the guy with me, look, I better go up and speak to these because they're suspicious. So I went up and he says, oh, what are you at, lads? I says, no, we're from an Irish language project in West Belfast, and we're over to told him the story. He says, oh, that's good, I thought you were them dirt birds from the Sunday World. So I was expecting it to be more hostile towards us, but it wasn't. They had moved on to the media as their enemy. But I mean, I found that the more we've worked across the so-called peace wall, the more you recognise that the Shankill in terms of community development is probably where West Belfast was 40 or 50 years ago. It's, I think the best way that I can describe it is that there are comparable levels of poverty, but on the Shankill there's a poverty of leadership. And the only real leadership that I see coming out of that area is from within the churches. They're the only people who have a vision, who have a drive to improve things, and who aren't interested in party politics. They don't really care about it. And that's refreshing. And I know that David, from interacting with West Belfast, has begun a number of projects on the Shankill Road which will bear fruit, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, but most certainly within 20 years you'll see the benefits of that. And I remember one day on the Shankill with David, and he would be new to the Shankill. I've known it all my life, but we were walking down, we were doing a series of interviews in Westkirk, and we walked down to get a sandwich. And this really massive black Jeep, a huge amount of money, more money than my house and David's house put together, had come round the corner bumping the horn, and David said, oh, that's somebody looking at me. I says, no, he's looking at me. He says, who's that? I says, that's the commander of the UVF on the Shankill. I said, what? He says, where did he get that car? I says, well, you think the police would be asking that? And he's now in jail. He was caught with guns and an unexplained £170,000 in cash. But to me, coming from outside the Shankill, the challenge of moving on from the days when paramilitaries were allowed to hold sway is long since past. And it's only the courage of people within the churches that's going to challenge that. And I think that politicians, and I don't want to be too hard on them, and this is all politicians, I think David's biggest surprise when he came to West Belfast was just how many people didn't like Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin are the majority party, but I think they're like the DUP. People only vote for them because they don't see anything else to vote for. And we're caught in that Tweedledee, Tweedledum politics. So I've been delighted to be on this journey with David, and I'm delighted to be here inside this and to see it restored. And I want to just really thank David and Elsa for what was a beautiful meal and wonderful hospitality. So, gur míle mágah agus like I made to David a chuid chéanara.
One of the things that's different from 30 years ago is I have to wear these glasses. Can't see anything on it. So Garamaka Jake for that. Well, you've heard Jake's story. Where do Elaine and I come into this? I'm very loud, aren't I? A boy doesn't need a microphone, he needs a silencer. I'm all right? Okay, good. We served for 17 years south of the border, worked for 10 years in Knock in East Belfast. That's where Elaine is from, and where I began my ministry. I was an assistant minister in Stormont Presbyterian. So East Belfast, geographically, a few miles away, maybe not even as far as Ballybay from here, but in many other ways as far away as Timbuktu, if you know our part of town. Well, there were a variety of factors at play that led us to move from the east to the west. Some are mentioned in the book there. The Presbyterian Church has been in decline in Belfast from a high point of about 90 years ago. And where I lived in East Belfast, still reasonably healthy, but in other parts of the city the decline's been very steep. And in one part, not only steep, but to the point of extinction. As Jake has said, all the Presbyterian churches closed that were there pre-69, and all the people had left. The parliamentary constituency of West Belfast is home to around 95,000 people. If it was an urban area in its own right, it would be the largest population centre in Ireland without a Presbyterian church, apart from Limerick. And I hope before too long we'll make a return to Limerick as well. But Limerick is quite a long way from areas where there's a strong Presbyterian presence. That's not the case for West Belfast. I don't know if you're familiar with a book called Operation World. It gives you prayer points for every country in the world. I use it every day in my own devotions. And under Northern Ireland, that section, it makes an amazing claim that in the 50-kilometre radius of Belfast is the greatest concentration of evangelical churches in the world. In the world. I'm not sure how you count that. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but still there's a lot of truth in it. And from a Presbyterian perspective, West Belfast is surrounded by lots of our congregations, but for decades no one had any interest in moving into that area to engage with the people that we used to engage with in the past. A variety of historical reasons, of course, we understand that. The Troubles was a terrible time in all kinds of ways. But it seemed to me to be very wrong that we shouldn't seek to have a presence in the area, especially in an era when many had turned their back on all forms of organised religion. Lots of people in West Belfast turned their backs on all kinds of organised religion. But I say to them, you haven't turned your back on this one yet because you haven't heard of us or you haven't met us, and that's why I'm here. But be that as it may, with no churches and no people and a legacy of 30 years and more of conflict, how on earth were we to re-engage with the people in West Belfast and to serve them in the name of Christ? Well, God began to open a door in a most unexpected way. My wife Elaine is a qualified secondary school teacher of mathematics, and she began to volunteer in a homework club for refugee children in West Belfast. She began through a friend in church who invited her. Many refugees have been placed in West Belfast because nationalist and Republican areas have, by and large, been more welcoming to outsiders than loyalist and unionist areas have been. But who knew that the people who would bring us together from East and West Belfast would be themselves from Syria and Iran and Iraq and Sudan? God works in mysterious ways. Well, as Elaine and I began to pray about her work with refugees, our prayers began to spread out, not just to the newcomers, but those who were born and bred in the area. And our sense of burden for the area began to grow. And this is, I believe, often how God works. He moves us to pray. He gives us a burden on our hearts, a vision for something or someone or some place. And then he says, I want you to go and do that. Another way to think of this is our involvement in West Belfast is to think of a tapestry. And God alone knows what all the threads in that tapestry are and how they're all going to be woven together for the final piece. It was while God was at work in us placing a burden on our heart for West Belfast and allowing us to engage with the area, that Jake was having these ideas about celebrating custodianship with the Presbyterian community for that particular building. It was the old Broadway Presbyterian Church. If anybody nursed in Belfast, you probably went to that church. It was a nurses' church they used to talk about up there. Well, there was a man called Marty McNeely who really made a lot of the initial contacts over that with Jake. He's a Presbyterian minister, very seriously ill at the moment, but he helped to break the ground up. And there's another thread that God is weaving in together. But there's another thread that comes in, and at the time it was unseen and unknown to any of us. One of the congregations that closed, Jake referred to the congregations that used to serve the area. One of the congregations that closed was called Albert Street Presbyterian Church. Now, Albert Street is just off the Falls Road, and this congregation was situated just opposite the twin spires of St. Peter's Cathedral, if you know that part of Belfast at all. But it had been there longer. There was a Presbyterian church on the Falls Road before there was a Catholic cathedral on the Falls Road. I like to point that out to people. It was there from the 1850s, but it closed in 1971. Those who left there went to join another Presbyterian church, Argyle Place, in the nearby Shankill area. They chose a new name, Westkirk, for the newly amalgamated congregation. But those who left Albert Street did so very reluctantly. They didn't want to go. They didn't want to leave. This was their area. Indeed, on the last night, the neighbours all came out and said, please don't go. But they had to go. It was 1971. Things were as they were. But the love for the people and the area never dimmed. And what I've only discovered since I've come to the area is that for 50 years, that's 50, for 50 years, the elders of that congregation prayed every Saturday morning. Every Saturday morning for 50 years, that there would be some means of getting back across what you might call the peace line, this great big Berlin Wall of a thing that lives between the two roads. Get back to show the love of Christ in the area. And they prayed that every Saturday through the 1970s, through the 1980s, through the 1990s, when, if you remember those days, it seemed impossible that God could answer their prayers, but they kept praying anyway, still loving the people for whom they prayed. The advent of the peace process brought a lessening of the violence, but the memory of it in the city still made the very thought of re-engagement across that fortified barrier impossible. But still they prayed. They prayed for a further 20 years into the new millennium. But it seemed their prayers were as far away as ever. As the 50th anniversary of that closure and amalgamation was approaching in 2021, they prayed with a hope that perhaps that 50th anniversary would give them a reason to go back and say, well, it's 50 years since we left, but we're back again. And they were praying every Saturday morning for that to happen. And then March 2020, if you remember March 2020, COVID and lockdown, and everything, it seemed, was over. The prayer meeting couldn't meet. It seemed that everything they'd prayed about for decades had come to nothing. Had it all been pointless? Why had God not answered? But what all of those people did not and could not know, Elaine and I, Jake, Marty and others, the Westkirk elders, is that in the background, God was at work on his loom, weaving the different threads together, bringing together thoughts, ideas, hopes and dreams until a tapestry was produced to display his wisdom and grace. Only he could do this thing. In June 2021, I attended a still socially distanced meeting in Church House, addressed by the then moderator, Dr. David Bruce. He spoke from Matthew chapter 9, where Jesus said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Pray the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest field." And as he applied that passage, a point struck me forcibly when he said this: consider you might be the answer to your own prayers. And what he said then forced me back into my chair, just like a chair that you're sitting in there, forced me right back into it in a way that I had never known. The only thing I can compare it to is this. You know the road between Coothill and Tullivin? Ruth, you'll know that well. And as you go out that road, it's a big, long, straight road. Well, I had a friend came to visit me one time, and he got a new Audi, and he says, "Where do you see this?" He put his foot to the floor, and away it went, and I was back in the seat like this. That's how it felt. It's the only way I could describe it. That's how it felt. I knew then, although I didn't know how God had been weaving the other threads together, that the answer God was giving to the prayers we were praying for West Belfast was to say, "I want you to go there." And most people think that's like a Craggy Island appointment, you know. You know, what did you do wrong? But we wouldn't want to be anywhere else. All I can say is be careful what you pray about. You know, you might end up there. Well, I've been ordained for over 30 years. I know how the Presbyterian Church works, and it could be summed up in one word: slowly. Slowly. And that's because we take an issue, we look at it carefully, we consider it, we don't rush in, we're not too hasty, and we don't like ill-advised decisions. That's all good. I'm not saying that's bad, I'm saying that's all good. It's a good thing. But from bringing this idea forward, what astonished and amazed me was from to Church House, and it has to go through about 8 or 9 different hoops to get till you actually get there. One a month. Every single month somebody said yes. Every single month, bar one was a wee bit maybe, but every single month it was yes, 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 yes. Now that is moving at warp speed of light when it comes to PCI. We normally move at the speed of a glacier. That was moving at the speed of light. And everyone said yes. It seemed like an idea whose time had come. And people got right behind it. I started work exactly 3 years ago this month, September 2022. And what did we find when we arrived? I hadn't put the sole of my foot on the Falls Road till I was in my late 50s. I'd been to the Royal, but that doesn't really count. Royal Victoria Hospital doesn't really count. It's sort of shared space. But I hadn't actually put my foot on the Falls Road. I was terrified to put my foot in the Falls Road. I thought I would be clearly identified as Prod. Get him! Nothing like that at all. Nothing like that at all. What we discovered was a very warm welcome. People were delighted that we were there because God had gone before us. Now, Jake just says he doesn't believe in anything, okay? But I think God believes in you, Jake. And I think he was at work in you, and he still is. And we haven't given up hope yet. God was already at work, introducing us to people like Jake, opening doors before us. And you know, it's been a joy to go through it. We've already mentioned Tom Hartley. I was at an event, and it tells you that in the book. I'm really plugging this book, aren't I? I was at an event in that that's recorded in that book in Culterland, the former Broadway church, And Jake had found the old bell for that church and refurbished it, and the bell was coming back, and this was an event to mark that return. It was 2 weeks after I started, and I'd started this work with great enthusiasm, hadn't a clue what to do. I mean, normally, you go visit people, or you prepare a sermon, or you visit a hospital or something. There wasn't any of that. What do I do? So I was just trying to get to know the area, and I went to this event 2 weeks in, and the guest speaker was this man, Tom Hartley, the former Sinn Féin Lord Mayor of Belfast and noted local historian. And in his speech, Tom asked the rhetorical question, will there come a time when Presbyterians once again raise their hearts and minds to God here on the Falls Road? Now, Tom had no idea who I was, no idea that I was there. But as I sat there, I thought to myself, in the providence of God, hearts and minds have been raised again to God in this area. And that's why I'm here. And I went to Tom and said, Tom, that's exactly why I'm here. Let's have a chat. And starting from one person to another person, I just got to know different people across the community, trying to get a sense of the community. And Tom had ended his lecture with these words, we need to get Presbyterians back on the Falls Road. There was a sentence I never thought I'd hear a sinner say, but that's what he said. And he said, why? Because they're so much a part of us. They want us to be part of that community and to expand it out, as Jake was describing earlier. I could hardly believe my ears, but God set before us an open door, and what he opens no one can shut, and what he shuts no one can open. And we walked on through. And in his providence, we were back, or at least at that stage just two of us were back, Elaine and I, and there more are gathered. We have a service every month. We get an average of about 40 people there, some local people, some folk from outside. If you're ever in Belfast, first Sunday of the month, 4 o'clock, Falls Road, you'd be very welcome to join us. It's been the joy of our life to serve there, and we believe everything beforehand's been a preparation. Preparing us to be there. Our time in Coothill was part of that preparation to be there, and we love and we're so thankful that God has put us there. I could go on about this all night. You folk will want some supper at some stage, but if you want to ask any questions in the public arena, I'm very happy, or Jake or I are very happy to take those, or we can chat to you afterwards. But if you have any, fire away. Will I move this? And so, any questions? I'm not going to sing, by the way. Not compulsory, but if you'd like to ask one, now's the time. Okay.
Thanks, David. Hiya, Jake. What's your hope what's your hope for the end of this work, for this vision, in relation to Presbyterians on the Falls Road in a kind of a general way? How do you see that work? How would you like it to work out? And what would you be hoping will ultimately happen?
I hope for two things. I hope that you end up with a permanent meeting house back on the Falls Road. And I hope that the Presbyterian repopulation of West Belfast will enrich the community. I think that for too long in West Belfast, we lived in a place which was totally cut off. When I grew up in West Belfast, at 8 o'clock at night, all the main roads were locked by security gates, and you couldn't go out. We were basically in an open-air prison camp. We had 38 military installations all around West Belfast, and for all of those years, all of the people growing up in that community seen anything from outside the community as threatening. And I think the more I meet Presbyterians, the more impressed I am by their community ethos, by their commitment to democratic process and to collective process, and I think I can just enrich our community. I also think that it is a big step forward in breaking down the wider community barriers in the north, because I think that what has happened to us all, because of our history, Our history is what it is and we can't change it. But for 450 years in the north of the island, we thought that the way to finish it was to slaughter each other to the point of exhaustion. And I think that after the last 40 years of mutual slaughter, it's time that we tried a different way. So my hope is that never again will we disagree disagreeably, as David says. And I think that variety and diversity are really, really enriching. But our problem in the north of the island has been that when we disagree with someone, we create enmity with them. So we need to get away from that. I mean, we're all human. None of us are going to change our political beliefs. So if I learn French, I'm not going to become a French Republican. If I speak Spanish, I'm not going to become a Spanish fascist. I will remain believing what I believe. And I think that in the north, that our political leaderships, our field political leaderships, they're locked within a dynamic which is, we're going to make sure you don't win. And that works for both sides. So it's a zero-sum game, and the communities are left locked into that political mindset. So if we can all together agree on a couple of very simple things. One, we're not going to be living anywhere else for the foreseeable future. We're all going to continue living where we live. We're all largely going to continue believing what we believe. So what we need to do is find ways to celebrate that difference instead of making that difference a point of antagonism. So get them back on the falls. That's all going on, mate.
Okay, thanks, Jake. Anybody else? Feel like a wedding here, moving around. We'll have to use that, Robert. We're not here.
I think the Irish language is taught in West Belfast, but what about the rest of Northern Ireland in schools? I'd just like a comment on that, please.
Well, Irish language is taught now in 47 primary schools across the north. Every county, the last county to get an Irish language school was Fermanagh. They were slow to the blocks, so Fermanagh didn't get their school until 2011. Our school is massively oversubscribed. We have we've slowed down growth because we don't have the secondary level capacity to meet any more schools in Belfast. So we have 12 primaries. The area that I live in, Spring Hill, 65% of the children there are educated bilingually. We have 47 schools across the north. We have 3 secondary schools, and we have plans to open another 2 secondary schools within the next 5 years. So it's a growing choice. The thing about Irish medium education is that, ironically, our biggest opponents were the Catholic Church. They despise us. They didn't want us to grow. And whenever we go into a new area to establish an Irish medium school, the Catholic Church is our biggest opposition. They want to control education, and we want education to be open to everybody. All of our schools are non-denominational. We don't turn anyone away based on religion, and we don't seek. We just happen to be predominantly Catholic subscribed at the minute, but that's because of the history, that the areas we set schools up in tend to be largely Catholic. But some schools will cater to the liturgical needs of whatever religion. So we bring in a minister, we bring in a priest to prepare kids for sacraments or whatever. In the secondary schools we don't let any clergy of any description into the schools. We encourage kids to go to meet clergy and to go outside for that. But we find that by and large in school settings, if you give churches controls of schools, it's not a healthy thing. The Catholic Church has probably created a great disservice to generations of people in the north. I remember we went to a Catholic school, and when we were growing up, we were told you would go to hell if you visited a Protestant church or a cemetery. I just find that bizarre. But I mean, that's what was being taught. And I remember Tom Hartley, when Tom was speaking about that, he was saying that when they used to pass the city cemetery, which was a Protestant cemetery, they had to run because they thought the devil would come out and catch them. So I mean, that teaching people things like that, you know, is just madness. But the Irish medium sector is growing, and one of the most hopeful signs for me is that 2 years ago, and we assisted them in it, people in East Belfast from a Protestant background established the first Irish medium school in the east of the city, and they've now set up the first Irish medium primary school. And I was up last night in Randallstown listening to Linda Irvine, who set the school up, and the stuff that they're doing is just amazing. They started off with 7 people in a class in 2015 or 14, and this year 700 people have enrolled in classes in East Belfast. In the Culterland, I'd say now at least 30% of our attendees at classes are from non-Catholic backgrounds. They're either newcomers or they're Protestants.
You can mention it in the Irvine, will be coming here in March.
Oh, and Linda's coming here in March. She's a great speaker. You should come out to hear her. So anything else in relation to schools? No?
David, can you tell us a bit about the involvement with the migrant people who have come?
What we do with the migrant folk is Elaine takes a homework club or assists at a homework club on a Wednesday, and one of our other team members, she assists on a Thursday. Then on a Wednesday morning, Elaine and I, we are classroom assistants in English as a second language ESOL class. One thing that you need when you go anywhere is know how to speak the language. You know how many of these people will be engaging with health and education because of small children, and if you don't know how to speak a language, it's no good. So teaching language is very important. And then on a Friday morning, Elaine and the same colleague, they run a class for ladies, general conversations, so they'll talk about things like going to the shops or festivals or family or something like that, all to help practice their English. And then we would do home visits with them. They're often needing advice about how to navigate the healthcare system, the education system. Just an example I heard today, the lady who works with us, one of the refugee families, very, very bright wee girl. She did her GCSEs, which is like your junior cert, and she missed out on an A star, which is a top grade, by 3 points. And this lady who works with us, Tony is her name, said, you know, if I were you, you'd get that remarked, because it's only three points out. And she had never thought of doing that, didn't know you could do that. And just heard back today, they got it remarked, and she moved up to an A star. So she's all delighted with herself. So the little things that are normal to us, that they don't know how to do. And then we try and share with them something about our faith. So we always invite them to our services. We invite them to our Bible studies, and it would be mainly the ladies with the ladies, rather than, you know, it wouldn't be me going to an Arab lady's house or something like that. It would be a lady to a lady, offering to read the Bible with them. And we get Bibles in their own languages, Arabic and Farsi. Farsi is what they speak in Iran. Those would be the two main languages. Google Translate is very helpful when you're trying to work these things out. So we have an Iranian Christian family. So these are people who belong to a house church in Shiraz in the south of Iran. And they were going to their church one day, and they discovered the secret police had rumbled them. So they just got in the car and left the country as quick as they could. And they've ended up here. A lovely young couple with a little wee girl, and we've got to know them quite well. And they are regular now at all of our events. Living on the Springfield Road, which is just on the falls side of the Peace Line. And it's lovely to meet them. They're lovely people. Unfortunately, the North has seen a lot of anti-immigrant racism, a lot of it very ill-informed, and we get to know these people. And the ones we have met, there's bad eggs everywhere. I mean, do we have our own bad eggs? Yes, absolutely. But the ones we have met have been lovely, lovely people, and very appreciative of everything we do. So thanks, Elsie. Yeah. Funny you should ask that. Chapter 3 of this book is by Jim Stullers. So yeah, Jim's a great friend. Jim can preach in Irish, which is, well, maybe Jerry, you could do that as well. No, come on. I was hoping that maybe you would say yes. So I can say what my name is and where I live, but that's about it. Jim can preach in Irish, and he's been at our services and helped us in that way, and has been a great encourager right from the very start. So we're very thankful for Jim, and we're all there's a book called Presbyterians in the Irish Language by Roger Blaney. I don't know if anybody's read that. Well, a lot of that is taken from Jim's own research. So Jim is a man who knows his stuff, but you maybe find that out when he came here. Yeah.
What is the update like on Falls Road for Presbyterian folk coming back to the Little Man City, and how do we enhance that?
Yeah. You sound like a man that comes from that city, are you? Whereabouts? Falls Road. Good man. My who. Well, as Jake says, actually, it's very difficult to get a house in the west of the city. Nobody wants to leave. They love it. And there's almost no land left. You've got the motorway on one side, the mountain on the other side, and there's nowhere else to go. So getting a house is very, very difficult. I know a guy who is from outside the area, and he tried to buy a house. I think he viewed over 100 houses, and he had offers down on over 30 houses before he actually got one. So you've got to be pretty persistent to go on with that. And many people actually have moved out to places like Crumlin and whatever. We are as close as you can get without being in Nationalist Republican West Belfast. We live there's a police barracks that's like, I don't know, Fort Knox or something. And we live one side of it, and Jake lives the other side of it. And that's about as close as we could get, really. But what I think is my experience anyway, Jake, is that I was fearful of buying. I thought I'd be burnt out if I bought a house there. I don't think that would happen now. I mean, I'm convinced that wouldn't happen now. But I don't think I could afford one there because the price goes up and up. Folk want to be there. But the appetite for us being there is very, very big. It's very big. I don't know about the living thing. May just be an economic thing. Jake, you maybe know more about that.
What part of the Falls were you from? Oh, Cavan Street. Oh, that's just across the road from my office. No, David's right. I mean, the pressure on housing in West Belfast is phenomenal. I mean, it's one of the most sought-after areas in the city, and people from it don't want to leave it. And the way I view this is that you don't always have to bring Presbyterians in. You can make people there Presbyterians. So, I mean, the way I look at it, as David had said, West Belfast, in my view, is a very secular community. And a lot of people from West Belfast have been joining those evangelical churches and those happy-clappy churches. So, I mean, there's always people looking for a spiritual outlet. And I just think that if there's a permanent meeting house on the Falls, that people will come to it. And the peace wall's there, and it's hard to envisage it being away. But when I was growing up, it was hard to envisage it being there. You know what I mean? So for half of my life, it wasn't there, and for the other half, it was. I mean, myself and David live about 900 yards apart, but between us is a peace wall and a massive army fortification, huge barracks. Well, it's hard to negotiate that, but there is much more movement between the Shankill and the Falls in the past 10 years. I remember talking to the minister of Westcork, and he said when the first time he ever came to the Falls in his life, born and reared in Belfast, he went to Sainsbury's, and he says he was really afraid. He says, like, I literally was afraid. He says, and I was pushing a trolley around going, everybody knows I'm a prod. He had his 2 children with him, and the two children have biblical names. So this man comes over to him and says, all right. I said, aye. He says, well, I call the 2 kids, Joshua, and I can't remember the other lad's name. He says, oh, are you a Protestant? He says, I says, they're lovely names. What are you over here for? And he says, people are just people. You know what I mean? And I've been getting into the Shankill since about 99, and nobody's ever insulted me. No one's ever made me feel unwelcome. Get a few looks, like, you know, when people say, so where are you from yourself? Ballymurphy. Huh? But beyond that, so I don't think that you're going to get a big influx of people into West Belfast, because it's just not in the room.
Jake, earlier you told us about young people wanting to stay. You talk a bit about that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at, and this is one of the things that I really found a contrast in the Shankill. When I was going over to the Shankill, anybody who had any drive, any initiative, or a bit of zumph about them, couldn't wait to get out. They just wanted to shake the dust of their feet and leave it behind them. They didn't want to come back. And West Belfast is different. I mean, the only thing that we ever had culturally was an absolute commitment to education. So when I live in the area I'm from's really the bottom end of the working class. You know, most people would see it as a ghetto. I have 5 children, and they're all university graduates. That doesn't happen on the Shankill. But my 5 children don't want to leave West Belfast. They all want to stay. And my second daughter, she's a trainee surgeon, and she was interviewed by BBC, and they said, so what's your ambition as a surgeon? She said, to be the first surgeon who doesn't leave Ballymurphy. So there's a real commitment to the community, and that isn't the case in the Shankill. And even people who do leave West Belfast, we know who they are and we know where they go, and we follow them and get them to reinvest in the community. And that doesn't happen. The only exception to that I know is that young boxer, Carl Frampton. Carl Frampton's from Taggers Bay, a real hardline loyalist area, and Carl Frampton married an Irish speaker from West Belfast and moved into West Belfast. But when he became famous and rich, he goes back into Taggers Bay and he invests his money. That doesn't happen in the Shankill. So, I mean, that's a real difference, and it's a game changer. And I'd like David just for a wee second to talk about your new project, because I think that's going to be a game changer too. Thanks.
Just before I do that, there's 2 things there that Jake's highlighted you could pray for. People from the Falls Road to become Presbyterians. Well, actually to become followers of Jesus Christ and worship in a Presbyterian church. Let's put it that way. And the second one is that would have a building. Okay, we thought we nearly had a building. It was owned by a Presbyterian elder. And when we got there, he said, I've just sold it. But who knows? Things may change. Anyway, to go back to that, so what Jake is saying about education in West Belfast being a big driver of the change, while we work in West Belfast, the Nationalist Republican side, we see the Shankill's really West Belfast and the Loyalist side, and we see this poverty of aspiration and achievement in education. There's so many people working for education on the Falls side, and people are trying on the Shankill side but not getting anywhere. So we decided we'd start a homework club. There's no after-school homework club on the Shankill Road, and a lot of these kids, there's nobody at home. When school's over, they're just wandering about the streets, or going somewhere making a nuisance themselves. So we have started in West Kirk Presbyterian a homework club, and we've got volunteer retired teachers, volunteer sixth form pupils, and volunteer teaching students from St Mary's on the Falls Road to come and do a club a couple of times a week. We're starting at this incoming week, and basically what we're hoping is that the children will see folk take time with them, be interested in them, whereas most adults aren't, and then see maybe even their peers or slightly older than them who are interested in education and maybe want to stay in education themselves on into the future, and see that dynamic happen that Jake has described as happened on the Falls, where people value what they've been given and want to pay back into the community by their interest and support. Now, I'll be long retired. It's hard to believe, but I'm 60. Could you believe that? I'm 60. And I retire in 7 years' time, whatever it is. And I think to myself, I'm only getting started. I wished I was here to see more. But that kind of input is a long-term thing. So maybe it'll maybe 10 years. Jake reckons it'll be 20. So I might just see how it is in 20 years. We will also ensure that although those kids know something about the church, the church-going population of the Shankill Road is 1%. On a Sunday morning, 1% of the people who live in the Shankill Road go to church. So most of these kids we're going to engage with, and this is like Protestant West Belfast, 1% of them actually go to church. So we're hoping to engage with them and make them aware of the activities that happen in church. There's youth work there, there'll be summer activities, there'll be Christmas services, that kind of stuff. A Christian publishing house in Scotland has given us very good mission discount on books, and so part of the books they'll be reading will be Christian books, and at Christmas time we hope to give them a wee present of a book, really to say thank you for coming all the way through term, to encourage you to keep on coming and know more. But clearly we're doing this from a Christian perspective out of the love of Christ. So we're hoping that both educationally and spiritually it's a blessing to the area. Now, David, I don't want to weary these people. Unless anybody's got a pressing question, I think maybe that's enough. Yeah? Okay, thank you.
Many thanks, David. Many thanks, Jake. It's been a most interesting, absorbing evening, and there will be an opportunity to talk to both of them over supper, which will be ready soon. Make your way to that corner of the meeting house, and you'll be welcome. Thank you again, all.
That's the other thing that attracts me to Presbyterians. Even when I started going to their meetings, they always have lovely tray bakes. They have a sweet tooth.
Not sure about that.